Okay, great. Well, nice to see all of you today. Thank you for coming. I know that those of you who want to hear this in Spanish, the translation is available, so if everyone's got their headsets working, that's great. It was almost exactly a year ago, I presented the club what we called a master plan, which was really a more aggressive plan, which really addressed the practice facilities of the club as well as the golf course with the idea of really maximizing the use of the property, returning the golf club to more of a championship kind of venue. But that necessitated, as we really looked at that, necessitated a change in the routing of the course, which this renovation plan now in response to the members saying, look, you know, it's okay, the practice facilities we have. It's all right if this golf club is more of a shot maker's, strategic kind of a golf facility, as opposed to the championship venue that Trent Jones would have designed in the mid-'60s. As we're all aware, technology's changed the game a lot and made courses shorter. Even as we get older, for whatever reason, we find the ability with this technology to hit the ball farther. So it's a good thing and a bad thing at the same time. Today, I just want to take you through just kind of where we are now. If you remember the master plan, there was a list of objectives in that particular plan, and that's really been scaled down to where we're really focusing more on agronomics, more so than maybe architecture. Still within that objective is to rebuild the greens. I think you're all familiar with the issues of the greens, and the agronomist has been here and done reports and spoken about that over the past few years. Rebuilding bunkers. Let's see if I can get this. There we go. Improved drainage for more consistent playing conditions. That's something that we could do more. I mean, we could sand cap the golf course. We could do, a much more extensive program, but within the budget that we've been given, I think Jeff's done a really good job identifying the areas that he has issues with, and I think we'll see some real improvements there. Develop or rebuild tees, new drainage and sand profiles and things which will make the tee surfaces even better. One of the things that in the long term is a landscape plan, and we'll look at some of the landscape that exists today as we go through some of these pictures. Now that the houses are really dominant on the outside of the golf course, there's a lot of beauty that exists within the course itself, but along some of the perimeter areas, more shrubs, more trees and things on the outside. And then even the existing landscape, there's a lot of areas that really haven't been maintained. Vegetation's overgrown, shrubs have become trees. And we'll look at some of that today as we go through some of these pictures. Issues such as consistency for paths, course furniture, signage, and so forth as a long-term look as well. One of the really fun things about Las Brisas is a very walkable golf course, being a core golf course. I mean, you have the clubhouse elevated, but once you're out on the golf course, it's by and large a friendly walking course. So continue to promote that culture of walking. I mentioned already, shot making over length is really, I think, what this course is going to be about continually in its future. And then, responding to the impacts of technology in the last 50 years. Since Robert Trent Jones laid this out, driving distances have even for amateurs, have become to the point that a lot of the fairway bunkers, as he imagined them, aren't into play. And at least who they're in play for now are more the high handicap players, where they originally were in a position to be more for the low handicap players. So we'll address that as we go through this today as well. It was referenced that I've been involved in a number of Robert Trent Jones golf clubs. There are existing clubs that have been called upon to have a long-term relationship with. The actual club called the Robert Trent Jones Golf Club, which hosted the President's Cup, was the site of the first President's Cup, which is a Ryder, for those of you maybe not familiar with the President's Cup, it's a Ryder Cup format, but it's the United States team on the years they're not playing Europe. They play, I guess you would say, the rest of the world. They play Fiji or the South Africa players, and I guess most of you being golfers would know that even in Europe and actually follow that. But that was the original site, and this was just one of the holes that we've redone. The green was originally up here at a higher elevation and brought this down This was actually an opportunity to actually go through this work when I started in 1998. Mr. Jones was still alive, so an opportunity to go down to Florida, kind of lay out some of the things that we were discussing between the club members and the European or the U.S. tour. So that was one of the initial phases of work we've done, and we're right now engaged in a kind of more of a long-term bunker program and shifting of bunkers and kind of diversifying the strategy of that particular facility. This is Incline Village, was up in Lake Tahoe, actually on the Nevada side of Lake Tahoe near the California state line. This was a beautiful mountain course that he did in the 60s, very similar kind of situation. But in that case, we took it all the way back to dirt, the entire site. So the general routing, kind of like we have here at Las Brisas, stayed the same, but the budget was different to where every blade of grass was reseeded or sodded, turfed, as we often say in Europe, and the greens were rebuilt and respectful again of the initial strategy and the contours that he had designed. They were all GPS, similar to what we would be doing here, but they were modified for faster green speeds that people expect today and that the turf grasses allow for. And some of the slow greens had just really gotten too quick. So that's just another example. And of course, Valderrama down the road, which has been a kind of an ongoing, I'd refer to it more as polishing the trophy as opposed to a real remodel. Very subtle changes that probably some of the members and the professionals both would recognize, but if you're not a frequent player there, you might not even pick up on some of the changes that have been made there. So the approach here is really similar to some of these other Robert Trent Jones golf courses. As the greens are renovated, that at Las Brisas, that they would be a similar style of architecture to the existing greens. As you probably know, maybe an obvious contrast to Robert Trent Jones' style would be, let's say, a Pete Dye, kind of a famous style, which would be probably the other side of that. And so, but the as you would expect in a Trent Jones Senior design, the contour of the green surfaces would extend out and connect to the landforms, and that allows the green complexes themselves to have more of a natural or, to look sympathetic to the surrounding landscape. The philosophy, that kind of philosophy in Jones's style allows for a wide flexibility in pin positions. One of the things I really continue to ascribe to, even though I do many different styles of architecture, is designing greens with the easier, more benign pins in the center of the green, and then the challenging pins, whether that's rolling up a slope or rolling off, challenging pins with the greens. And so with that kind of green design, for championships, generally you like to put the pins in the corners of the greens, which are generally more difficult. And if the contours are more difficult, you can take the same golf course and really vary the difficulty of it just by the setup of the course. In certain days, you may want to have all the pins in very easy positions because that's the level of play you have on the golf course. Other days, you may want to mix them up with a few difficult, a few easy, probably what you would normally do. And then, of course, for a club championship or some other kind of event, you can really create very difficult kind of pins if you choose to do that. The average green side of the new size is 565 meters squared, which is very comparable to what you have now. The existing greens, we're going to GPS those greens. In fact, they've already been GPSed, so we have a record of what the greens are in terms of size and contours, and then apply the concepts of those green designs in the new greens. Thing to keep in mind is that the new varieties of turf grass and the greens that you have, and I think you've already seen the work that Jeff's done in removing the thatch from the greens you have now, those greens will allow for tighter mowing. You'll find greens are going to have be more consistent, faster green speeds. So it's going to be the opportunity with those quicker green speeds to also vary the pins to where if you start to put those near some of the contours, the greens could get really, the pins could get very difficult. And some of the greens that you have there, in fact, you've already done that, and we'll look at some of the greens you've altered over the years. Some of the existing slopes, may need to be softened during this kind of refinement process. So that's kind of going to try to give you an overview of how we'd be approaching what we have out there right now. So I'm going to kind of take you through this plan, which you've seen, I think, posted on the wall. I know several of you had copies of it with you. And then we'll also follow that up with some photographs. As far as the length of the holes, you can see there are very similar lengths to what you have now. The total length really hasn't changed. The first hole, for example, I'm not really sure, we could not come up with 365, and that may be a factor of the way the pro shops have been built. Maybe the course hasn't been remodeled. But essentially, the first hole is the same hole. The second hole, we'll look at some of the differences there, pretty subtle. But generally speaking, I think you'll see how this tracks very closely to what you have now. The long par 5 gets slightly longer. The other par 5 gets slightly longer. Of course, we'll talk about number 3, which actually gets shorter, which is, well, I mean, of course, you can call any hole whatever par you like, really. I mean, but it's really as it plays in today's game as a par 4.